Hey guys, so in this week's video we're going to be having a bit of a run through of the dual root model of reading, and we're also going to look through some different tests that you can do to assess reading or reading difficulties or some kind of speech difficulties related to the reading of words. And we're going to tie that in hopefully to last week's video where we looked at the chocolate factory example and just how we can piece together different cognitive models and how those things make sense, perhaps in a practical setting. So this is the dual root model of reading, which you would have seen in the lectures that you've listened to hopefully for this week on dyslexia. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview of the model. So it's broken down into the lexical root on the left and the non-lexical root on the right. So looking at the right non-lexical root first, so if you go from the top, you see a printed word. What's the first thing that needs to happen? Is you need to recognize the letters on the page. So that's letter recognition. Now this first route that you can go down is kind of the simpler route. So it's the kind of route that you go down when you're learning to read words when you're a child. So here you recognize the letters and you sound the letters out. This then leads to speech sounds, which leads to speech. So to give you an example, that would be if a child sees the word cat, so it recognizes the C, the A, and the T, and then that child sounds out the letters. So they'd say k-a-t, cat, and they've read the word. Obviously, as we get older, we tend to rely on this less and less, and we'll only really use this non-lexical route when we come across words we're unfamiliar with. So if you're reading Harry Potter for the first time and you see the word Voldemort, you're probably going to have to use letter sound rules to sound that out because it's not a word you've seen before. It doesn't really have any meaning, or you don't have any memory of it. So that non-lexical route is for sounding words out, and it's also used when we're children, when we're learning how to read, and then later as adults, we use it for words we're unfamiliar with. Now looking at this lexical route, so again, we see the words, we recognize the letters, but this time it's less about the sounds that the words or the letters are making, and it's more about the meaning. So the first thing here we have is the written word store. So that's a memory or a representation in our mind of what that word looks like on a page. From there we progress to the word meaning store. So that's the store of information, not just what that word looks like on the page, but what does that word mean? And then the third one, spoken word store, is how does that word sound when we say it? Follow through with these things. This leads to the speech sounds and then ultimately speech. Now, when we talked about the chocolate factory in the last video, we talked about producing these different kinds of cognitive models. And we talked about examples of what might be happening when parts of that model break down. So this is very much the same in that we have the thing going in to the then chocolate factory now reading model, which is print, and we have the thing coming out, which is speech. And we use information about the things going in and the things coming out, which is speech, to try and understand what's going on inside the mind or inside this model. And in different types of dyslexia, different parts of this model can break down. But before we get into that, we're going to have a bit of a look at the different tests that you can use to assess this. So this one is called the letter sound test, or the LEST. So just to go over the instructions really quickly, it's basically what it sounds. So you'd say, I'm going to show you some letters. What I want you to do is to tell me which sound these letters make. So you show a child some letters and just ask them to make the sound. So you point to the letters and the child will repeat the sound. If it's correct, you say, that's correct. If it's incorrect, you might correct them. So say, the letter T makes a T sound. And if the child names the letter, it just gives you other instructions to prompt them to ask them the sound of the letter, not name it. This is what it looks like. So you can just see there's a whole bunch of letters on the page. All the instructor or examiner does is point to the letters and the child just makes the sound. This is what the instructions or the scoring sheet looks like. And you can see on the very left, it's got the letters themselves, and it gives the examiner an example word of what the letter should sound like, meaning for the T over here, it's T as in toy, so we know it's a T sound. and then just marking them correct or incorrect. You can see as we go later down, the items get harder, and so do the sounds. So a G end or a in gnome sound is a bit harder than a T in toy. The next test is the picture naming test. This is from the ACE, or the Assessment of Comprehension and Expression test for years or ages 6 to 11. Basically what they have to do here is we show them a picture and we just want them to tell us what that picture is. And this is an example of a practice question from picture naming where the answer is obviously flower. This is another test called cross-case matching. So here, what they have to do is match the uppercase version of the letter to the lowercase version of the letter. So this is looking at the letter recognition. So in the practice example here, it's an uppercase letter Y, and they have to identify which of these two letters, which we can see as a lowercase p and a lowercase y, connects with the uppercase letter. So this test here is called the door-door test. Pretty simple. Basically, what the child has to do is just, from pairs of words, circle the word that is spelt correctly. So for example, rain, is it R-A-N-E or is it R-A-I-N? This is an example of an answer sheet, so the correct answer is bolded, but normally when a child sees it, it would just be both words appearing normally, and they'd have to know which one is spelt correctly. So this is looking at recognition of the appearance of the word. The repetition of nonsense words, the NEPSI. There's a whole bunch of different made-up words broken up into different syllables, and the child has to say the words back. So repeat the words, and you score it based on how many syllables they get correct. So this is more about the word production. So this test here is a picture recognition from the Peabody Picture Vocabulary Test. So unlike the ACE, which we saw earlier, which was the one with the picture of a flower, where they had to actually say the word, here they don't have to say the word. Instead, they are told a word, and out of 4 options of 4 different pictures, they have to point to the picture that reflects the meaning of that word. So it's about understanding the meaning of the word as opposed to being able to produce that word. So this is the Castles and Coulthard Irregular and Non-Word Reading List Test, or the CC2. Essentially here you give a child or show them a bunch of flashcards which have words printed on them. They just need to read them aloud. And this is made up of some regular words, some words that the child may never have seen before, and some silly or made-up words. And the child just needs to try their best to read as many as they can, because the words get harder as they go. Now, for the instructor's purposes, there are 3 different types of cards or words that are presented to the child. So the first type is regular words. These are words like bed or car, words that are spelt phonetically, meaning the way they sound is exactly how they're spelled. Now, whether a child had problems with the lexical or non-lexical route, meaning irregardless whether a child had seen the word bed before or sounded it out, you could use both methods to get to this word. Meaning if you sound it out or if you're familiar with the word, both those ways would allow you to read a regular word. Then there's irregular words. So these are words like island or yacht or kernel. These are words that the way they're spelt is not how they sound. So if you were to read these words phonetically or by the letter sounds, you would make mistakes. So if you were to read island just by using letter sounds, you would say island. There are some words that we don't even think of as being irregular words, like the word good. We just say them really naturally, but actually good is an irregular word, because if I were to pronounce good exactly like it's spelt, it would be good, the same way we say food. So often we don't even think about these things, and we really just do them automatically. But depending on the type of dyslexia or speech problem a child has, they can find some of these words really difficult. So those are irregular words. The third type is non-words. These are just made-up words. So you can use letter sound rules to sound them out. There's no irregularities in the pronunciation, but they're not real words. The key distinction here between irregular and non-words, which is something that is really great about the Castles and Coulthard test, is it can distinguish between those lexical and non-lexical roots. So remember, there's two types of dyslexia. So there's surface dyslexia and there's phonological dyslexia. Surface dyslexia is when children have problems with the lexical root, and phonological dyslexia is when children have problems with the non-lexical root, so the letter sounds. If a child has problems saying an irregular word, the way we say irregular words is not by using our letter sound rules, but by drawing on the meaning of the word, or a written store of the word, or a spoken store of the word, meaning a memory of how that sounds when you say it. But if those are broken down, i.e. there's a problem in the lexical root, you can't rely on that, meaning instead you're going to have to rely on those letter sound rules, so you won't be able to say an irregular word. Whereas with a non-word, you need to be able to sound those things out before, because it's a made-up word. You don't have any memory of it. You've never seen it before. But if you have a problem with those letter sound rules of sounding things out, i.e. a child who has phonological dyslexia, or a problem with the non-lexical root, they're going to find those non-words hard. And this is a way in which these tests tease apart or differentiate between different children with different difficulties. So going back to that reading model, that dual root reading model that we talked about at the beginning, when talking about our chocolate factory example, we talked about we only have information of what's going in and what's coming out, and we have to use that information to kind of deduce what's going on inside. What's really great about these tests is that all these different tests tap into different parts of these models, kind of the way we elaborated with the Castles and Coulthard test. And if we have different tests that tap into different parts of the model, if a child is doing poorly on one of the tests, we can work out maybe where the breakdown is or where that child's problem is occurring. This is really great because it can help inform things like speech therapy or occupational therapy for that child to assist with that problem. So to give an example, our door test, that would be the written word store, because the child has to draw on a memory of what that word looks like, meaning the correct spelling of that word, in order to be able to get those items correct. You could do this with all the tests we've talked about, but it just gives you an idea of the benefit of constructing these models from last week, how we construct those models to begin with, how we theorize about these models, and now how we test different parts of these models and how that can be used in therapy. This is just that same model again, but instead of having the different components of the dual root reading model, I've just taken them out, and this is a task that's completely optional. It's additional to this week's summary and content, so only attempt it if you want to, but you can just have a go at mapping the different tests to different parts of the model. So how I said that all these tests tap into different aspects. If you want to try and have a crack at what tests might be tapping into what aspects, I'll post the answers in a few days, but again, this is completely optional, just if you want to challenge your learning a little further.